In this video, I'm going to be doing a review for Bodybuilding and Self Defense by Myles Callum. It was a book written in 1962, and it introduces the reader to the discipline of bodybuilding, and it teaches them about general fitness and self-defense. This is something I really believe in. If you are into physical culture, in order to be well-rounded in that realm, and just being a man in general, I think you should have knowledge of self-defense. I think you should have some form of fighting ability, some kind of martial art. So in case a situation happens where you have to defend yourself or defend a loved one, you will have that ability. Now, the other thing this book does, it puts bodybuilding together with martial arts, and there is plenty of overlap between the two. Different forms of physical culture don't have to be mutually exclusive, and some people try to make it about that. Like bodybuilders tend to get a lot of hate from people who practice different disciplines, and it's usually a one-way street because bodybuilders really aren't focused on anybody else and trying to tear them down. It's usually the other way around because most people are insanely jealous of bodybuilders because they have superior physiques. Take Andrew Tate, for example. He made a bunch of derogatory statements toward bodybuilders, saying that we're pussies because we actually want to be fighters but can't be fighters, which is just ridiculous because, as I said, there is plenty of overlap from bodybuilding with other forms of physical culture. Take Bruce Lee, for example, who I did a video on. He very much respected bodybuilding as a discipline, and he incorporated bodybuilding into his own training. Bolo Young, successful in bodybuilding, successful in powerlifting, and successful in martial arts. Jean-Claude Van Damme had a bodybuilding background. Dolph Lundgren. So, Franco Columbu was a boxer, and then, he became a bodybuilder. So as I said, there's plenty of overlap, and that was really more common back in the day with physical culture. You saw, and Franco is a perfect example. You saw him do boxing, you saw him do bodybuilding, powerlifting, and strongman competitions. So it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. If you go watch my series, Can a Bodybuilder Fight? That's the point I try to drive home, is there is plenty of crossover and overlap. Just because you're a bodybuilder doesn't mean you can't practice martial arts, and vice versa. A martial artist, can incorporate bodybuilding as Bruce Lee did. Usually you're focused on one or the other, but you can incorporate some of it in. For example, my primary discipline is bodybuilding, but I'm still interested in martial arts. I'm interested in boxing. I'm interested in wrestling. So, I can learn a little bit of that and apply that knowledge in case I'm ever in a self-defense situation. And this is the gist of what the book promotes, which I'm going to get into it here in a little bit. But let me say this about including bodybuilding in the realm of self-defense. Bodybuilding is a form of self-defense in itself because if you look strong, if you are strong, which bodybuilding gives you strength, it gives you size, and it gives you confidence. It gives you intimidation. That in itself is a form of self-defense because most predators are going to seek a weak victim. And again, I highly urge you to check out my series, Can a Bodybuilder Fight?, where I cover all this stuff. Now, let's get into the book. As I said, this book was written in 1962, so it is a little dated. But I'm going to go over everything point by point, and then I'll give you my overall thoughts on it. All right, so let's get into the book. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to try to be concise so I'm not running all day and I can hit on all the key points. The first point, it talks about the benefits of having a sound body. It's stating the obvious. It's getting the reader engaged and telling them why they should take up bodybuilding, why they should learn self-defense, why they should be strong. Then the first type of exercise they talk about is the dynamic tension, isometrics. As I talked about my goniometrics video, this was a very popular form of exercise in the 1960s. And some even believed it would eventually replace weightlifting, which of course never happened. It began to fall out of popularity, as the decades passed. But the book, it points to different celebrities at the time. The guy who played Wyatt Earp, etc., who used this method of exercise. After it gets done talking about dynamic tension, isometrics, they move on to tumbling and gymnastic type exercises. A bit impractical because most people aren't going to have mats in their home. They're either going to be at a gym or in a martial arts dojo. So if you do something like this, you would have to have mats at home. Or the book also suggests a grassy area to practice in, but not the most practical. So this may be a mark against the book, but you'll see why it comes into play later, because the book promotes judo as a form of martial art, which involves a lot of falling. So you could see why they would promote tumbling and gymnastics. And this would even be good if you were training to be a pro wrestler, but not the most practical exercise for most people. After that, they go into basic calisthenics. So this is kind of the lead up to the actual weightlifting portion of the book. It talks about push-ups and squats, body weight exercises. Now, as far as the actual weightlifting goes, the book promotes something called the Basic Six, which is going to be number 1, the bench press, number 2, the overhead press, number 3, squats, number 4, rows, number 5, curls, and number 6, deadlifts. These are the 6 exercises the book recommends to the beginner to start out with, and the book recommends 1 set for each exercise. They give the rep counts. So basically, it's promoting an overall full body workout for the beginner. And then, in addition to the Basic 6, they also include a chapter called Interesting Exercises. So these are additional exercises they add in for you to eventually incorporate. And this is calf raises, pullovers, behind the neck press, side bends, shrugs, and then alternating dumbbell press. And then finally, we come to the self-defense portion of the book. I liked how they started out saying the importance of strength. And strength is definitely an attribute. You get that through weightlifting, especially when you're considering most street confrontations are very brief, very short. Strength advantage is going to be huge. It shouldn't be neglected, especially when you're considering it's almost usually going to be between 2 untrained fighters. And then it begins to talk about how to actually practice these things. Of course, it suggests having a mat, which most people don't, or you could practice in a grassy area. The fighting style it basically promotes is judo and jiu-jitsu, popular during this time. I think the book would have benefited more if they had promoted more of like the World War II dirty fighting technique rather than just the judo throws and the jiu-jitsu arm locks. It needed more striking, more like Fairburn stuff, whether it be the chin jab, going to the eyes, going to the throat, the groin. but they didn't promote much dirty fighting in this book. And then it moves on to the street confrontation, encountering people with weapons. The only street fighting strike or maneuver that they really promoted in this book was a kick to the knee, a savate kick to the knee. And then they added in that shouting while you execute this will add 15 to 20% strength to your blows, and it would be a method of intimidation, that's pretty standard in most martial arts. So my overall thoughts on this, very unique, very interesting book, combining the discipline of bodybuilding with the discipline of martial arts and self-defense. It's definitely promoting the reader to be a well-rounded man who is strong and can take care of himself. And as I said, bodybuilding is a form of self-defense in itself because it makes you strong. You look strong, and it's a form of intimidation because most people aren't going to mess with a person that is strong and projects strength. They're going to pick weaker looking victims. I probably myself, the self-defense portion, the tumbling, the judo, the stuff like that, I would have preferred the book to go more toward the direction of dirty fighting, efficient strikes to vital areas. I would have liked to see more striking, less going to the ground, because going to the ground in a street fight isn't the greatest idea, especially if there's multiple attackers. If you get trapped on the ground, you can have your head stomped in by somebody else. And it's best to stay on your feet. Even in the case of if you knock your opponent out, knock your opponent down, you want to get away to avoid legal trouble and avoid trouble with others. So it's just good advice in general to try and stay on your feet in an altercation like that, because you don't know who else is around, you don't know what witnesses are around, and you want to after you've taken care of the situation, you just want to get out of that area as soon as possible. And if you go to the ground, it just opens you up to a lot of trouble and potentially a lot of bad things that could happen. Now, my overall thoughts on the book, I love the message that's promoting, the discipline of bodybuilding, the discipline of martial arts, in order to be well-rounded, incorporating both. The exercises that it lists for the full body routine, it would be suitable for a total beginner because you're going to basically see results on anything when first starting out. It's not something I would use because I'm much more advanced. But it's really the message in the book and the idea of putting bodybuilding and martial arts together and self-defense and just being a well-rounded enthusiast of physical culture is really what the book is about. And for that reason, that's why I would recommend having it in your library, especially if you collect older books.